All right, I made it. Oh, it has been a wild day of traveling. It hasn't been bad. Like, everything has gone super smoothly, except for one little part where I sort of got myself lost, but I do that every time I come to Winchester. It's just something that I add for enjoyment, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it's fine. Once I get far enough down the hill, I know where I am. So, but I'm back in my hotel room. It's a nice hotel room. I kind of feel like a movie star with like this velvety, sparkly curtain behind me, and this wallpaper here is all through the whole room. It's a really comfortable room. It's kind of a seashell themed room, actually, for you, really, now that I'm looking around. The wallpaper is kind of this white and iridescent shell. I don't know if you can see the sparklies in that. Then there's this chair over here that kind of looks, you know, like a shell, and it's kind of that blue velvety stuff. Also, the bed has the blue velvety stuff back behind the bed. And this is a hotel that I'm kind of checking out to see if I want to use it as our place to stay in Winchester for my literary tour that I'm doing next spring. That's kind of my excuse for traveling to England this week, is just to sort of check things out, make sure they're still here, make sure England is still standing before I advertise this literary tour that I'm planning for Jane Austen themed sites. So you guys will get more information about that as time goes on. I'm going to do like an official announcement in July, but if you want to get on the waiting list for that, be sure and check out the link in the description box. All you do is just give me your name and email, and then I will email you when I do the official announcement, because it's a first come first served, and I've only got like 7 spots. So it's going to be very exclusive. So you want to make sure and get on there, or get on the waiting list if you miss a spot. But anyway, more information on that later. Right now, I want to share with you guys the book that I got. I got one book in Bath. I just bought one book, but I did get a pamphlet as well that I'll show you guys. So I got this one book at the stall in the Guildhall called Scoob's Books. You guys will see that in the video that I'm putting at the end of this video. So, like, you know, watch through after I talk. I have a video for both days, and the first one I'm putting up, the one at the end of this video, shows some of my favorite sites in Bath. So anyway, in the Guildhall, there is a stall with books called Scoob's Books, and they're pretty good price. This was £3.75, and it's called The Taxidermist's Daughter by Kate Moss. Now, I really like Kate Moss. I've read 2 things by her so far. I read The Winter Ghosts, and then there's another one that she wrote, and I can't ever remember what it is called, but anyway, and I really liked him. I like her writing style. I like that it's kind of like mysterious, not spooky, but not a mystery. It's just kind of like atmospheric. I always use that word for everything, but that's really what it is. So this one is kind of a gothic thriller set in 1912. It's probably gonna freak me out because like the slightest thing gives me goosebumps, and so I'm not going to read it until I get home since I've all found myself in, you know, strange places. But I will give it a try because I really do like her. So yeah, we'll see. And then I got yesterday at the Jane Austen Center, this is a little pamphlet that you get if you do the tour at the Jane Austen Center. I did that tour because I've always wanted to. I've been to the Jane Austen Center before to shop at the gift shop and go upstairs for the tea, but I've never done the little museum tour and seen the waxwork Jane. So I did get my picture with the waxwork Jane. I've been waiting over 10 years to see that, so super cool. Anyway, I did the tour yesterday. I wanted to check it out because I want to put that on my tour itinerary as well. And then I have a little bookmark in the pamphlet. This was like, they had a quill and ink out, you know, so you could practice writing. And some of us already write with those on a regular basis, so I think I did pretty good. But it's just a little booklet with some information about Jane Austen. It says, includes 34 lesser known Jane Austen facts. So they know that it is predominantly Jayites who come and do this tour, and so they aren't messing around, right? They're going to give us some lesser known facts. So I'll read through this and let you guys know if there's some stuff in here that's really, like, you know, surprising, probably new to us, Jayites, etc. All right, so now that I did that, I want to tell you guys about the books that I've read in the last couple of weeks. And all my books are, you know, 8,000 miles away in the US. So I've got Goodreads pulled up and my book journal, but I do not, unfortunately, currently write down my book reviews in my book journal. I keep them on Goodreads, so there's a couple things in here that I'm just gonna have to try to remember. I've started making a list of the things that I read, though, in my journal, and I've got all these pretty little doodles and stickers and things in there, so that's been fun. I titled it This Week's Noteworthy Reads, and I'm really trying to switch over to doing more things, you know, written in journals and things than everything saved online. So to pick up where I left off, last time I talked to you guys about what I've been reading, I read the St. Swithin's Day poem by Jane Austen. It's in, well, probably any collection of poetry by Jane Austen is going to feature her St. Swithin's Day poem. It's something she wrote like 3 days before she died. So I was going to read that poem here in Winchester tomorrow on June 15th, because this is where it takes place and this is where she wrote it. However, St. Swithin's Day is July 15th, so just a little off. But I read that, and it was a funny, fun poem. So St. Swithin is kind of like the patron saint of Winchester. And so for a really long time, they have celebrated St. Swithin's Day with races. I don't know if they still do anything like that, but in her time they did. And the legend on St. Swithin's Day is whatever the weather is that day, then for 40 days straight, you're going to get that weather. So St. Swithin was a bishop of Winchester way back in the day, really long time ago, like over 1,000 years ago. And when he was ready to die, he asked to be buried outside in just kind of like the common churchyard with the common people and not put in some, you know, really spectacular place. And so they did, but later on they dug him up and moved him to a spectacular place within the cathedral. Like, I think in the cathedral or the old cathedral. I'll have to look into that, or you can look into that. But now he's apparently put like a weather curse on Winchester because he asked not to be moved, and they moved him anyway. So 40 days is what you get. 40 days, whatever the weather is on the first day, that's what you get. And you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. That's why I read that poem, but it was all for nothing. Okay, the next one I read was Lover's Vows. So that is the play by Elizabeth Inchbald. It is featured in Mansfield Park. That's the play that they perform. I had never read it before, and it was so funny. I really loved it. I loved it. I would not recommend getting this copy, though, that I bought. It is like an independently published copy. For one thing, there's some typos, but also there's a section where the butler makes all these rhymes, and it is so funny. However, all of his lines, like his rhyming lines, are in this really tiny font, like 4 maybe or something. Like you can barely see it. In fact, I had to pull out my kids' school magnifying glass in order to read it, and I was still struggling. So I've got to get a different version. Don't buy the version I just showed you. So I am going to look tomorrow at Waterstones if I remember and see if I can find a good one. If not, I may just find it online and print it out, but it was really funny. The butler is just over the top. Okay, and then I read a poem by Oscar Wilde called The Grave of Keats. I just happened to turn to it, actually. I was flipping through a poem book I have, looking for something else, and I saw that, and it struck, my attention because that is one of the people who is associated with Winchester, and he was here for a short time at the end of summer, beginning of fall, and this is where he wrote Ode to Autumn, and one of his famous poems. And so I read this poem that Oscar Wilde wrote when Keats passed away. And then this next story I read was A Good Man is Hard to Find, a short story by Flannery O'Connor. So I had heard someone talking about a couple of her short stories on his channel. I can't remember who it was, I'm sorry. So I was thinking that I had a big collection of all of her short stories, and so I pulled it out and read A Good Man is Hard to Find, and I have to say I was kind of underwhelmed. It's a story of a family, like a mom and a dad and 2 kids and then the grandma, that go on a car trip, and the grandma is kind of like, I don't know, hoity-toity and ends up causing indirectly them to have a major catastrophe. And I read some critical essays on this like after I read it. It's only a few pages, like 7 pages or something. Now I'm trying to see like, what am I missing here? But I wasn't really missing anything. I think the problem is this was just written for a different time and a different kind of people or class of people that we don't really consider as socially acceptable anymore. So the grandma was like, you know, thought very highly of herself and couldn't see her own moral hypocrisy, kind of like, you know, it's okay for me but it's not okay for you sort of a thing, that kind of a mentality. And from I think the point of the story was that she got what was coming to her because of her hypocrisy, and I think it was supposed to speak to like people of her day, of the time it was written, and how people who think that they're upper class and act all snooty, you know, it was like a lesson to them sort of a thing. But the problem with it that I really had was that's just not a socially acceptable behavior anymore. So like all of the points that were being made in the story, people my generation and younger are already like, yeah, you don't treat people like that. You don't lord it over them or act like you're high and mighty, or, you know, it's one of those like households where the mother even ruled over the daughter-in-law sort of a thing, and we just don't do that anymore, right? Like we usually just ignore people like that and think, wow, what a, you know, she's really full of herself, and we don't sort of kowtow to our elders like that anymore, unless that they are people who are kind and deserving of respect, right? The idea of, you know, honoring your elders even when they're complete jerks isn't really a thing anymore. And I'm fine with that. So I guess this book just, I guess the story just kind of felt old and not really applicable anymore, because we've kind of already established that in society that, you know, people who act superior are not really socially acceptable in the first place. I did kind of see some similarities between Flannery O'Connor and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the fact that they both kind of spoke like harsh realities to the people of their time to kind of cause them to confront their own moral hypocrisy. And so in that case, like, it did interest me to maybe read some more by her, but this particular one I didn't really find to be super deep. All right, and then next I read a couple of poems by Robert Burns. I was trying to find his poem To a Mouse because I was getting ready to read Of Mice and Men for my little summer school thing that I'm doing. And so I thought I'd read the poem that inspired the title of the book, which is called To a Mouse. And as I was flipping through to get to that page, I saw a poem of his titled The Rights of Women. And so I stopped there and read that first. I'm going to have to read some more biographical information as well as just other of his writings before I can determine whether it was supposed to be like satire or not. It seemed kind of pro-woman in a way. All right, and then I read To a Mouse, which is like funny poem that he's apologizing basically to the mouse for wrecking his home. And then I read Of Mice and Men, and I read most of it, probably like the first 40-ish pages. And then I was like, yeah, I remember this story and I don't want to read this. And so I skipped to the end and then I was like, I didn't want to read this. So my reason for adding that to my summer school list was that was one of the books that I remembered from middle school and high school just being repeatedly assigned. And I'm like, what is the deal with this book? Why does everyone want us to read it? And so I decided to read it to find out. I am frustrated, and I think that I am frustrated, and I'm gonna blame some of my issues on having to read this book as a teenager. Honestly though, the way that the profanity in this book, as well as some of just the situations involving just women and grossness and stuff in this book, I think that it wasn't that I wasn't aware of it the first time that I was assigned to read this. It's that I had never read anything with that stuff in it. Like, that was stuff my mom didn't allow me to say. And at the time, I looked up to adults, for the most part, all adults, as like moral guides. I just kind of, I grew up in a home where you were taught to respect your elders and that you could trust older people, you could trust adults, and you could trust them to give you direction and wisdom and to help you make right decisions and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that the fact that teachers assigned this book, and then I read it and I was like, what? This is horrible. So much, it makes me sound like I was raised like in a convent or a shelter or something. I actually wasn't. I was actually kind of like raised myself from a pretty young age, but it was just I had a high moral standard, I guess, that maybe I was kind of a hypocrite too. But anyway, and so I was just frustrated with the fact that adults were like assigning this, like encouraging us to read this and respond to it. So I guess all of that came rushing back as I was reading it, and I was like, I'm mad that they stole some innocence from me. So yeah, I DNF'd. I was like, barf, I do not want to read this book ever again in my whole life. I've made a note to myself, never read this book. And I just really don't think I'm a Steinbeck fan. I read The Pearl a couple of years ago. I didn't like that. I don't like his writing style. My friend Debs over at Rainer Reads Stuff, her channel, she was talking about Steinbeck actually recently, and she went on and on about The Grapes of Wrath to the point where I was like, maybe I do want to read that, because I have been recommended that book before. It's about people who are living in Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl and going west and all that stuff, and my family did that. My mom's side of the family, I guess that's the family story, is that they left Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl, came west, and that's how I ended up growing up in Eastern Oregon. But, and so knowing that the book is about that, like I kind of want to read it, but I really don't care for John Steinbeck. So did somebody else write one? But I was going to say the story of Mice and Men. I think that one of the reasons why that was assigned to us is it really does bring up some questions on what is compassion. I mean, it brings up all kinds of things, like you could go the direction of like assisted suicide, or you could go the direction of like mercy killing, or you could go the direction of, you could talk about people with special needs. It's pretty obvious that one of the characters is autistic, pretty severely, and it's interesting because I had never heard the term autistic until I was probably already an adult. So we never talked about that in the classroom. I don't ever remember talking about that. I don't ever remember addressing the issue of special needs and how to have compassion for people with special needs. And so reading the story, and I won't give spoilers if you guys aren't aware, but reading this story, the way that the person with special needs was handled seems harsher and harsher as like life goes on. I think it's so odd to me. And I just don't remember having those conversations in class. I don't even remember the conversations we had. So it's frustrating to me. Like I feel like this book could be used for a discussion on special needs and especially autism. And I don't know if it currently still is being used, but surely there are other books out there that aren't like 80 years old or something, and also so full of other objectionable things. So I don't know, maybe I'm being a snob, but I didn't like it. All right, and then speaking of books I didn't like, I read Lady Susan, and this is me giving Jane Austen 2 stars. Yep, I did not enjoy Lady Susan at all. I read that for the first time about 15 years ago, and I found it really convoluted and just kind of like meh. And yeah, I still feel the same. It wasn't like a well-paced, planned out, tightly packed story. It also was epistolary, and I just don't enjoy epistolary writing. The whole thing pretty much is told in letters. I don't like that style, so that didn't appeal to me. But this version that I got, don't buy this version either. The dialogue is all packed together in one big paragraph. This is not the 18th century anymore. I know that in Jane Austen's time, they were, trying to get as much ink on the paper as you possibly could, and, squishing everything together to save room and all of that, but we are not 18th century paper rationers anymore. And so I would really love it if they could break up the dialogue into separate lines like a modern day book is written, so that you can understand what in the world is going on. This one was just written with it all together as one big paragraph, and so I got frustrated with that. I got frustrated with trying to follow that, and Lady Susan was not likable, and not that she has to be, but I guess I just was wanting something else. I didn't like it. So if I can find me a copy that is not all squished together, maybe I will give it a go again. And then finally, I have been reading Arabella by Georgette Hare. I got this for Mother's Day from my husband, and I started it probably a day before I left. It's been slow going. I can't read on the plane very well, and I've been so exhausted every night that I haven't read for very long, but I did read quite a bit on the train today, so I'm about halfway through. I'm liking it okay. It's not Jane Austen, and I don't think that it's actually supposed to be. I guess I'm just of the mindset that every Regency romance is a Jane Austen knockoff, and that's not the case. That's definitely a fallacy. So I do need to get that out of my head, but I don't know, like there's a little bit of inaccuracy, I think, that's kind of bugging me as far as like Regency era stuff, but also the thing that I don't really like Arabella, and I think she's supposed to be likable. Like, I think she's supposed to be somebody that you find funny and endearing, and she's annoying the snot out of me. Like, I just really think she is obnoxious. So hopefully by the end of the story, I will like her. However, I am that person who, complains about Edward Ferrars and complains about Eleanor Dashwood and complains about all the people who have just, whiny sensibilities. I don't know. I'm that person who complains about Jane Austen, but loves her to death. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Arabella. Like I said, I'm halfway through. I'm hoping just to get a lot of reading in tonight. It is 8:15 here, but my sleep is all off, so I haven't been going to bed till like 2. I should be able to get quite a bit of reading done tonight after I get this video up, and maybe I'll get most of the way through Arabella, and maybe next time I update, I will end up telling you how wonderful I found her to be. But for now, that's it. Please stick around and watch my little bath video that I found at the end of this. I know this is a long video, but I really wanted to show you guys some of this stuff and take you along on my journey with me. So hope you're doing well. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.